Gilbert stepping up. Bang! Bang!
It's time to level up your game. Introducing the all-new ESPN app. All of ESPN, all in one place. Your home for the most live sports and the best championship moments.
The electricity is palpable.
Step up your game with no annual contract required. It's the ultimate fan experience. Level up for more on the ESPN app or at stream.espn.com. Sign up now.
Una silla de masajes puede parecer extravagante. 8 configuraciones diferentes, intensidad ajustable, además es calefaccionado. Y se siente tan bien. Sí, una silla de masajes puede parecer extravagante. Y 2, bueno, aún más. Pero cuando esas sillas de masajes vienen con un auto, se vuelven bastante prácticas. El nuevo Volkswagen Tiguan 2025 con funciones premium como los asientos delanteros con masaje disponibles. Solo parece extravagante.
Make your next vacation unforgettable. On Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Star of the Seas, it's everything you've loved about every family vacation you've ever been on, with mind-blowing thrills at the largest water park at sea, 7 onboard pools for every level of chill, more than 40 ways to dine and drink, and even more to enjoy at our award-winning private island, Perfect Day at Coco Cay. This is the new Star of the Seas. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Where's your playlist taking you? Down the highway? To the mountains? Or just into daydream mode while you're stuck in traffic? With over 4,000 hotels worldwide, Best Western is there to help you make the most of your getaway, wherever that is. Because the only thing better than a great playlist is a great trip. Life's the trip. Make the most of it at Best Western. Book direct and save at bestwestern.com.
Excuse me, Laurie.
Oh, Mr. Brackett, I'm sorry, Mr. Brackett.
Oh, I didn't mean to startle you.
That's all right.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
What's up, everyone? I'm your host, Will, and you're listening to One Good Scare, the show where we explore our favorite horror movies. After more than a week away, I'm really excited about taking a deep dive into one of my favorite movies of 2025, one that has already cracked my top 25 list. Ryan Coogler's modern masterpiece, Sinners. Before that, though, don't forget you can follow One Good Scare on Instagram at OneScarePod and TikTok at One Good Scare Pod. Make sure to follow and leave a comment or two. I absolutely love discussion and interaction. Also, be sure to leave a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Pods. It lets me know you're enjoying the show, and I promise you that goes a long way to keeping it going. And remember, my goal with One Good Scare is not to replace your viewing experience. It's to enhance it. So if you haven't seen Sinners yet, and I realize it just came out recently, so you may not have, it's actually streaming on HBO Max. My strong encouragement is to watch that first, and then come back and give the show a listen. Of course, if you'd rather listen than watch, I appreciate that as well. Just remember, One Good Scare is one gigantic spoiler. Alright. Let's dive into a fantastic and soulful horror movie, Sinners. So I truly think Sinners is a masterpiece, and the numbers support the possibility of this being true. IMDb has it at a 7.6 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes lists it as a 97% fresh rating, alongside a 96% popcorn meter, and Letterboxd has it at a 4.1 out of 5. And it struck absolute gold at the box office, raking in nearly $366 million worldwide, set against a $90 million budget. That makes Sinners the 5th highest grossing horror movie of all time. And that's not all. It's the highest grossing original movie of this decade. The beauty and acclaim of Sinners lies in its bold and original storytelling. It's just a reality that we live in a world where franchises or IP-driven movies rule the box office, and it's become increasingly rare for an original story to achieve both commercial and critical success. But Sinners may be an indication that audiences are craving original stories, and that may turn the tide. Of course, the movie is not without its controversies, though I'll say up front, these are more manufactured than anything else. There are some who believe the movie is decidedly anti-white, and that its narrative presents white people as evil. There are some who believe the movie is anti-Christian or pro-witchcraft. But context matters, and frankly, Ryan Coogler's film is nuanced and unflinching in navigating both race and religion in the Black experience in the Jim Crow South of the 1930s. Let me also add, good art can make us uncomfortable. It can also make us squirm and cringe and feel a range of emotions. And rather than resist it or oversimplify it or offer reductionist takes that completely miss the point, it may be better to sit with the discomfort for a second or two, then explore it a bit more, because it can be a powerful teaching tool and a catalyst for growth. Okay, it's time to settle in and turn down the lights as we explore a modern horror masterpiece, Sinners. The movie opens with a woman narrating against an animated scene. She says, "There are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true, it can pierce the veil between life and death, conjuring spirits from the past and the future. In ancient Ireland, they were called Fili. In Choctaw land, they call them firekeepers. And in West Africa, they're called griots. This gift can bring healing to their communities, but it also attracts evil." The movie title Sinners then appears on the screen, followed by the words, Clarksdale, Mississippi, October 16, 1932. The first scene shows a vehicle pulling up to a small church on Sunday morning. A young man, Sammy, gets out of the car. He's bloody and dazed, and is holding tightly to the neck of a broken guitar. He stumbles into the church, where his preacher father meets him halfway up the aisle. His father embraces him and tells him, "I want you to swear to me and before this congregation to leave those sinning ways where they lie. I want you to promise right now. Drop the guitar, Samuel." As his father commands him, Sammy has flashbacks, though we're not quite sure to what. The scene then shifts to 24 hours before, where Sammy is picking cotton in a field. He's humming and singing to himself as the sun rises. He says good morning to Miss Beatrice, who asks if he's going to play the guitar later that evening. Sammy plays coy and heads off the plantation. He's a sharecropper in the Jim Crow South, and he's met his quota early in the day. He walks back home and wakes his siblings before looking out at the open field. We then see a man named Smoke, wearing a blue scally cap, standing next to his twin brother Stack, who is wearing a red fedora. The two smoke a cigarette while standing outside a large, run-down building. They're waiting for someone, and as a car pulls up, Stack grabs a small bag out of the back seat of the car. Smoke asks if the man is Hogwood, and he asks if they're the twins. Stack cracks a joke, saying they're cousins. Hogwood gives Smoke and Stack a tour of an old sawmill and asks what they're planning to do with the place. Smoke notices what appears to be a bloodstain on the wood floor and asks if the floors have been washed. Hogwood appears concerned they'll back out of the deal, and the two say they are grown men with grown men money and grown men bullets. A tense scene ensues as all three men place their hands on their pistols. Stack then hands Hogwood the small bag of money. He's shocked by the amount, and Smoke says it's the last money that he'll get, and if Hogwood or any of his clan buddies step foot on the property, they'll kill them on sight. Hogwood says the clan doesn't exist anymore. The scene takes us back to Sammy as he walks towards the small white church and steps in to greet his father. Sammy says he finished up his quota for the day as he stares at a guitar sitting up near the altar. His father says he wants Sammy to help give his sermon tomorrow and has him read 1 Corinthians 10:13. Sammy begins reading before closing the Bible and reciting it from memory. He grabs the guitar and says he doesn't want to be late. His father objects, but Sammy says he's been working all week and is looking forward to playing music that night. He tells him he will be back in time for service the next morning. His father calls to him and says, "Son, you keep dancing with the devil. One day, he's gonna follow you home." The scene then shifts to Stack, who honks the horn for Sammy to come out. Smoke tells Uncle Jed, Sammy's father, that they'll return Sammy in one piece. The three men then ride through the cotton field, making small talk. Sammy asks the twins about Chicago, and he says he heard they don't have Jim Crow up there. Smoke says Chicago is Mississippi with tall buildings, and that's why they came back home. Smoke then pulls the car up in the middle of the road, and the three head out into a field where a truck has been covered with foliage. As they pull it back, a rattlesnake hisses at the men, but Stack tosses Smoke a knife, and he promptly stabs it in the head. Smoke checks his watch and laments that Hogwood put them behind schedule and suggests they open up the next weekend. Stack disagrees and says, "Grand opening. Start this shit with a bang." The two argue back and forth, but Stack says it's a mighty day to be free. He wants to open their own juke joint. Smoke suggests they split up to make better time, and he agrees to take the truck into town. Smoke talks some shit to Sammy about Stack, and the brothers embrace before splitting up. Sammy goes with Stack while Smoke heads into town. Smoke pulls up to a storefront and asks a teenage girl to keep an eye on the truck and its contents. They negotiate a price, and he tells her to lean on the horn if anyone suspicious comes around. Then he heads into the store and asks a Chinese girl, Lisa, if her dad is available. She calls to him, and his name is Bo Chow, and Smoke embrace. Bo asks what he can do for Smoke, and he tells him they're going to have a big event later that night, and he needs catfish for 100 people. The two make small talk about the twins' exploits in Chicago, when suddenly Smoke hears the truck horn. The girl says someone is stealing, and Smoke pulls his pistol and shoots one of the men in the ass. The two recognize each other, and the man says he didn't realize it was Smoke's truck, that he thought the twins were in Chicago working for Capone. Smoke then shoots the other guy in the knee before giving Bo Chow money for a doctor. Back in the store, Smoke tells Bo he needs a sign and asks if his wife Grace is up for making one. Lisa runs to get her mother, and she walks into the store where she negotiates a price with Smoke for the sign. The next scene takes us back to the car, where Stack is telling Sammy about pleasuring a woman. Sammy's interest is clearly piqued, but he says he wants to drive the car fast. He then asks about the twins' father, and Stack tells him that Smoke killed him. Stack notices the guitar, and Sammy thanks him for it. Stack tells him it's Charlie Patton's guitar, and asks if he can play it like him. Sammy plays a blues riff and sings a soulful melody, drawing the excitement of Stack, who says they're going to make a lot of money. The two pull up to a train station, where Stack approaches an older man, Delta Slim, playing a harmonica. Stack offers him $40 to play at the grand opening of the juke joint that night, and all the ice-cold Irish beer he can drink. Delta Slim accepts and riffs with Sammy as Stack tells a growing crowd that the two will be playing that night at the old sawmill, which is now called Club Juke. A quick scene shows a woman who turns and sees Stack talking to the crowd. Another woman catches Sammy's eye, and he walks up to talk to her. The two make small talk, and she introduces herself as Pearline. Sammy is clearly interested, but she says she's married. She walks away, and Sammy notices the other woman staring straight at Stack. She walks over, and Stack tells Sammy to walk away. Stack and the woman go back and forth, and it's clear they had some type of romantic relationship. Stack says he wanted her to stay away from him, but she counters by reminding him of the last time they slept together. The two go back and forth as Delta Slim and Sammy stand nearby. The woman's name is Mary, and she tells Stack that she buried her mother the day before. She's upset the twins didn't attend the funeral. She tells Stack to rot in hell, and as she walks away, he says he will save her a spot right next to him. The scene takes us back on the road as Stack, Delta Slim, and Sammy ride through the cotton field past a group of convicts doing manual labor. Slim tells the story of a friend who was lynched by a mob of Klan members. They made up a story to justify the killing. The three then pull up to a field, where Stack calls out to Cornbread and says they have business to discuss. Cornbread says he's not interested, and Stack insults him before making an offer he can't refuse. The scene then moves to a small house, where Smoke pulls up in the truck and places a small bouquet of flowers on a tiny grave marker. He says, "Papa's here," before placing the flowers on the gravestone. A woman comes out of the house, and Smoke asks how she's doing. Smoke says Stack is on the other side of town, and tells her they bought the sawmill and plan to turn it into a juke joint. The two continue talking, and it's obvious she's apprehensive of him. She walks back into the house, where she sells a pinch of herbs to two young kids. They hand her plantation money, and Smoke tries to hand her a small wad of cash. She refuses, saying it's blood money. She says his money is cursed and she doesn't need it. Smoke tells her he's traveled all over the world and seen men die in different ways, but that he never saw roots, demons, ghosts, or magic, just power. She calls him a fool and says that after all of that, he's right back in front of her, standing safely. She asks how he knows she didn't pray for his and Stack's protection. He asks, "So why those roots ain't work on our baby?" She says she doesn't know, and we learn the grave outside belongs to their child. She says they work for him and asks if he still has the mojo bag that she gave him. Smoke unbuttons his jacket and pulls out a small bag he was wearing around his neck. She lights a candle and says, "Soil of my soil, bone of my bone, blood of my blood, I bless you. Ashe." Smoke watches as he lights a pipe, and she asks what he wants with her. He says they want her to cook at the juke that night. She then calls him by his real name, Elijah, and says she knows better. He responds, "It still hurts coming back here, but I love you, and I miss you." She walks over to him and the two embrace. She says to him, "Your body ain't forget me," and the two make love right there. Smoke and the woman, whose name is Annie, are on the road heading back towards the sawmill. Stack, Sammy, Delta Slim, and Cornbread are likewise driving in their vehicle to the sawmill, and Bo and Grace Chow are shown gathering into their truck and heading towards the sawmill. Suddenly, we see a man jump out in front of a small house. He seems to be smoking, and is covered in burns and looks beat up. He knocks on the door, and a man and woman open the door with shotguns drawn. The man tells him he was attacked by Choctaw, and the couple says there are no Indians around for miles. The man falls to his knees and tells the couple the Choctaw took his wife. He looks past them and notices the clan robe sitting on a bench. He tells them he has gold, and that the Choctaw meant to rob him, but that they can have it if they help him. Then, a truck and two men on horseback pull up to the house. A man gets out of the truck and knocks on the front door, and the woman opens up, shotgun in hand. He tells her they're looking for someone dangerous and asks if she's seen him. He peeks in and she calls for her husband, Bird. The man tells her that the man they're looking for is not what he seems and cautions her about letting him into their home. One of the men on horseback calls to the man and says the sun is almost setting and they need to get back. They ride off, and the woman moves through the house calling for her husband. She discovers the man they let in sitting in a rocking chair in a back room. He's covered in blood, and Bert is lying on the ground, seemingly dead. Suddenly, he gets up, and he has a gaping wound on his neck. The man tells her he's all better now, and we see blood covering his face and neck. He has sharp teeth and red eyes. Bert says to his wife, "Hey, baby," and the woman screams. And this is the end of Act 1. Okay, so to this point, there really isn't a ton of action, though the last scene of Act 1 offers us a glimpse of the horror to come. We're about 45 minutes into the movie, and almost all of it has focused on building the story and introducing us to the world and characters. And honestly, I love it. There's really something to be said for movies that take their time to let the story unfold, and each of the characters are captivating in their own ways. I'll admit something. Coming in, I was a bit nervous about Michael B. Jordan playing a dual role. One character is hard enough, but two seems infinitely more difficult. But so far, I think he's doing a great job pulling it off. The Smokestack twins are similar but still unique, and the differences are subtle but still evident. Right now, everyone is moving towards the juke joint, so we know this is the place where the horror is going to happen, and we know the three vampires have something to do with it, though we're not quite sure how just yet. Let's keep going to find out. Act 2 opens with Smoke rigging the electricity to the sawmill, and then we watch as folks come in one by one. The catfish fries as Delta Slim plays a piano. Annie talks to an older man who says he'll take a glass of corn liquor. She charges him 50 cents, and he pays with wooden nickels. Smoke moves in, clearly frustrated, but Stack serves the old man. Smoke then asks to speak with Annie and Stack. In a side-by-side scene, Cornbread welcomes Pearline to the juke joint, as Smoke tells Stack and Annie that it's not a charity. They're only accepting real money. Stack tells Smoke the old man worked hard for the wooden nickels, and to let the people enjoy themselves. It's a place just for them, and they need to come just as they are. Cornbread continues welcoming folks in, as the woman from the train station attempts to walk into the juke. Cornbread stops her, as she is a white woman, and he suddenly recognizes it's Mary. The two embrace as Sammy and Pearline walk through the juke joint. He tells her the twins are his cousins. Cornbread shares his condolences about Mary's mother, and she walks into the juke to get a drink. Meanwhile, Smoke tries convincing Stack about the need to accept real money. Pearline and Sammy talk about playing and singing, when he notices Mary. He tells her he's with the twins, and says he's their little cousin. She recognizes him as Little Sammy, and offers to buy him a drink, a whiskey for each of them. Meanwhile, Smoke tells Stack that it's bad for business. Mary and Sammy make small talk about Sammy's music, and he asks her, "What are you?" She makes a joke and says that her grandmother was half black. She tells Sammy about her mother helping to raise the twins. She laments they had the money to buy the sawmill, but couldn't send flowers to her mother's funeral. Smoke says they sent flowers while she was still alive to smell them. Smoke sends Sammy to check in with Delta Slim, and the crowd becomes louder. Smoke tells Stack that he needs to take care of Mary and get her out of there. He tries, but she's not having it. He tries to pay her off, but she resists that as well. He tells her that he got her a rich white husband, but she says that was his doing, that she didn't want to be white. She wanted to be with him. She pushes back and says that if anyone hurts her, the twins will kill them all. She says she waited for him, and he says that he loves her and thinks about her every day. He says he wanted to keep her somewhere safe, and that it was never going to be here and never going to be with him. Then he walks away, leaving Mary in tears. Smoke watches from overhead as Delta Slim plays a slow piano tune. Then, Slim gets up and addresses the crowd, telling them about a young, bad bluesman he's heard about. He calls up preacher boy Sammy to play a song. Sammy starts playing, but Delta Slim tells him to introduce himself to everyone. He's Sammy Moore, a sharecropper from Sunflower Plantation, whose daddy is a preacher. He then plays and sings a song he wrote for him, and as he does, the crowd starts moving, slowly at first, then faster, as Sammy really gets into it. A quick flashback scene shows Delta Slim telling Sammy that the blues wasn't forced on them like religion, that it's something they brought with them from home, saying, "It's magic what we do. It's sacred and big." The scene cuts back to the juke joint, and this time we see Sammy playing in slow motion as Annie's voice narrates the lines from the opening of the film. As the camera moves around Sammy, we see music makers from the past and present, cutting across the generations and transcending time, location, and circumstance. We also see Grace and Bo responding to the music as their ancestors dance near them. Sammy's gift is transcendent, and he's a rare once-in-a-lifetime talent. As the music intensifies and the crowd responds, it appears the sawmill is burning down, emphasizing Sammy's power. As the camera pans to the crowd, we see Sammy playing and them dancing in an open field, unencumbered by the four walls of the building around them. We then hear Delta Slim's voice saying, "With this here ritual, we heal our people, and we be free." As the camera pans out from the crowd, the music changes slightly, and we see the three vampires watching from a distance. They're carrying banjos and watching silently, listening as Sammy plays. Then, they walk slowly towards the juke. The next scene shows Sammy kissing Pearline in a back room. And as the two prep to make love, Sammy is eager to try out Stack's suggestions for pleasuring a woman. He hits the right button, and Stack smiles as he listens briefly from outside the room. We then see Cornbread talking to a partygoer by the front door. Suddenly, he looks over and sees the three vampires approaching. The leader waves, and Cornbread tells the partygoer to get the twins. We then see the twins are in an upstairs room, and Smoke tells Stack he tallied the till for the night. He hands him a slip of paper with the financials, and tells him they'll be out of money in 2 months flat at the rate they're going. The scene takes us back downstairs, as the three vampires greet Cornbread, who asks what they need. They say they heard about a party, drinking, food, and blues music. The lead vampire says they like music, love to drink, and are hungry since they walked there. He takes a small step forward, hoping to be invited inside. But Cornbread stops them just as Sammy and Pearline step out of the side room. The three continue conversing with Cornbread as the twins, along with Mary, Annie, Grace, and Bo, head to the front door. The lead vampire introduces each of them. He's Remick, and the couple is Joan and Bert. Just then, Sammy steps in and asks if everyone is all right, and Remick zeroes in on him, saying he heard him singing and playing beautifully. Smoke asks where they're from, and the three say North Carolina. Smoke asks if they're Klan, and Remick appears offended. He says they believe in equality, want to play music, and have a good time. The three then play a quick tune, Pick Poor Robin Clean. Stack seems to be enjoying the music, but Annie senses something is off about the three. Smoke stops them and tells them it's a juke joint playing blues music. Bert says they have money to spend, but Smoke says to get down the road and back into town. Remick appears upset that they're not allowed in because they're white. Then he points to Mary and asks how she got in since she is white presenting. Annie cuts off Mary's response and says she's there because she's family. Remick asks if they can all just be family for one night, and as he steps closer, Smoke puts his hand on his pistol. Remick, now getting the message, turns and walks away slowly as Joan and Bert hum softly. The twins discuss being prepared if the three come back with company. Stack asks what if they just came to sing, but Smoke says there will be a bigger problem if someone spills a drink on them or steps on their shoe. Then he tells Cornbread to not let them in before walking away. The next scene shows Sammy walking upstairs to talk with Smoke, and he thanks him for putting the guitar in his hand. Smoke tells Sammy that being a musician will get old at some point, but Sammy says he's heading off on his own the next day, maybe to Chicago. Meanwhile, Stack and Mary talk privately, and he tells her they are underwater. Mary asks about the three white people, and she says she can scope them out and see if they really have money. The scene alternates between Sammy and Smoke, who was telling him about the time their dad beat them. Smoke wanted to run away to the next plantation, but Stack wanted to go to Mound Bayou, a black-owned small town. Mary tells Stack that she can go get the money for the twins, as Smoke tells Sammy he should be a preacher like his father, and he can still make music, just church music, and if he wants to leave, to go to Mound Bayou. Mary tells Stack they'll be found out sooner or later, and Sammy tells Smoke he's not going down to Mountain Bayou. Smoke tells Sammy that he better enjoy the rest of the night, because it's his last juke. Sammy says Smoke is in no position to tell him how to live his life. Meanwhile, Mary convinces Stack to let her speak to the white folks, and he hands her a pistol for safety. Smoke tells Sammy that if after tonight he finds Sammy playing in another club, he will kill him. Sammy responds, "Look, I'm leaving that plantation, just like y'all did, and if that's a problem for you, kill me now." Smoke pulls his pistol and points it right at Sammy's face, saying, "I'm a soldier boy, and you just gave me a command," before holstering the pistol. Mary walks outside the juke towards the three, who are playing a soft ballad just outside the building. Mary listens and claps after they're done, and says she's come to see if they're good people. Remick says they are, and pulls out several pieces of gold, says it's from a different place and a different time, but that it spends just the same. Remick says she can have it, but it's no good to her, because she's in deep pain that money can't fix. Mary tells him her mother recently passed away, and Remick offers his condolences. He says he wishes he'd met her sooner, because he could have saved her mother from her fate. He says he can save Mary from hers. He turns away to place his banjo on the ground, and when he turns back, his eyes are red and he is drooling. Mary quickly realizes something is wrong, and she gets up and pulls her pistol. She says she's heading back to the juke, but as she turns to walk away, Remick leaps in the air, and the scene suddenly shifts. Back at the juke, Pearline gets on stage and starts singing a soulful tune. Meanwhile, Mary walks back to the juke and asks Cornbread if he will let her in. He does, and she walks back in and straight to Stack. Delta Slim walks over to the entryway, and Cornbread asks him to keep an eye on it as he steps outside to use the bathroom. Meanwhile, Mary calls out to Stack and he follows her to the dance floor, where she hands him the gold coins. As he talks, Mary leans in to kiss him, and Stack pulls away. She says he's scared, but he says that she belongs to someone else. Meanwhile, Cornbread finds a tree to pee on, but as he does, he hears whispering in the woods. The scene shifts suddenly to Smoke, who pulls back the curtain on the game room, where a man is holding his bloodied face. Another man has cut him across the face with a straight razor, after it was claimed he had loaded dice. Stack follows Mary to a side room, where they immediately kiss. Meanwhile, Smoke subdues the man with the blade, and when they check his pockets, they find the loaded dice. Pearline continues singing as a group of men beat up the men with the loaded dice. Smoke and Mary begin making love, but Stack notices she's drooling, and as he pulls her dress down, we see a bite on her shoulder. Smoke tells Sammy to find Stack, and he asks Delta Slim where he's at. Slim points him to the back room, but when he opens the door, he sees Mary on top of him. Smoke asks where's Stack, but Sammy tells him he's in the back room. When Smoke walks over to the door, he notices Cornbread is gone and asks Delta Slim about it. He then opens the door and finds Mary biting Stack's neck. She stands up, covered in blood, and Smoke immediately shoots her 5 or 6 times. She falls to the ground, but stands up almost immediately and says, "We're gonna kill every last one of you," before running out of the juke. Meanwhile, Stack is on the floor dying. His jugular vein has been torn open by Mary. Annie, Delta Slim, Sammy, and Smoke all huddle around as Stack bleeds out. Smoke is in shock over the sudden death of his brother, and Delta Slim tells everyone to leave. The party is over. In the back room, Sammy laments that he could have stopped it and asks Annie what happened. Sammy tells her Mary said, "We're gonna kill all of you." Annie, realizing something is up, says they need to move Stack's body outside. She says, "You shot Mary," and she got up and ran out as if nothing happened. He asks if Annie has magic to bring Stack back, and she says she can't. He admits Stack is gone. Meanwhile, Grace tells Bo they need to leave immediately and go home. Bo agrees to get the car and walks outside into the night. Annie locks the back door behind her and tells Sammy to watch over Stack. Suddenly, Cornbread calls from outside and Slim asks where he's been. He says he needed to take a shit, just as everyone walks over to him. Cornbread sees Smoke covered in blood and asks what happened. He says, Stack's dead. Cornbread asks to be let in, but Annie tells him to hold on. She wants to know why he needs an invite. Cornbread plays it off and disrespects Annie to try and talk to Smoke. She puts him in his place quickly and asks why he can't walk in without an invite. She tells him to admit that he's dead, that one of the white folks killed him and he's a haint. Cornbread laughs while standing outside. He goes into a monologue and says they should all be kind and polite to one another, that they're all one people, and they shouldn't go into other people's places uninvited. Smoke says he's been going in and out all day without an invite, and realizes something is off. Cornbread says Stack was his ride, and now he has to walk back home, and so he asks to get paid. Smoke reaches into his pocket, and as he hands Cornbread his pay, he tries to grab his arm and bite him. Reacting quickly, Smoke shoots Cornbread in the face, but falls outside while doing so. Cornbread immediately gets up. Half his face is blown off, as Smoke rushes back inside. They close the door as Cornbread stands outside waiting. The group suddenly hears knocking on the back door, coming from the room where Stack was in. He's suddenly alive and alert, and he wants to be let out of the room. Smoke walks over and talks with him, asking how he's feeling and saying he lost a lot of blood. Stack, with a huge wound on his neck, says he's doing much better now. Annie says she checked his pulse and that he was dead. She says that's not his brother, and Stack asks if he's going to let her get in the way of them, before banging on the door and yelling to be let out. He asks Annie for the key, and Sammy looks into the room, when suddenly, Stack breaks down the door, toppling it right on top of Sammy. He lunges towards Smoke, but Annie throws something on his face, causing Stack to burn wherever it landed. He screams and runs outside. Perline asks what was in the jar, and Annie says, "Pickled garlic. These ain't haints. They're vampires." And this is the end of Act 2. Alright, so Act 2 has far more action and horror than Act 1. But more than that, Act 2 is one of the most beautiful scenes in any movie, horror or otherwise, that I've seen in a long time. I'll talk more about Sammy's transcendent gift a little bit later, so tuck it away for right now. You know, there's something Ryan Coogler manages with Sinners that so many other vampire movies fail to do. He makes it tragic and personal. It's not just that the bloodthirsty vampires want to kill everyone. That's normal. It's that they kill Mary and Cornbread and Stack. These are characters we've come to know and connect with. We feel the tension and romance between Stack and Mary. We also relate to the kindness of Cornbread. Ryan Coogler hasn't just thrown these characters together, and he isn't just pitting them against vampires. To this point, he's made us feel for them in relatable ways, and we see evil overtake them while they're doing normal things. Talking, peeing, shitting, having sex. Okay, I want us to keep going because the climax of this movie is wild and unbelievable. So let's go to Act 3. Act 3 opens with Grace saying she needs to get Bo, who went outside to get the car. She fights back, but the group decides they need to wait until sunrise before they do anything else. Annie says they need garlic, wood, silver, and holy water, and the group loads their weapons. Annie says she's heard stories about how haints work. They switch places with the soul of a man. But vampires are different. the soul gets stuck in the body and can't rejoin the ancestors. They're cursed to walk the earth full of hate. Smoke asks if they can bring the others back by killing the one who made them, but Annie says it's not possible. Each vampire needs to be killed one by one, either by sunlight or a wooden stake to the heart. Smoke asks why this happened, and Sammy says it's his fault. His daddy said the devil was coming on account of his music. Delta Slim cuts in and says if the devil wants Sammy, he has to get through him first. Annie makes Smoke promise that he will free her before she turns into a vampire. She wants a stake through the heart and not to become a vampire. She says there is someone waiting on the other side for her, their child. Smoke says he's going to make sure Annie gets home safely. Suddenly, a scream ripples through the group, and they discover the man with the cut face lying down in a back room. They move him outside and hear Remick singing in the distance. Sammy looks out and sees Remick in the middle of a circle. All the partygoers from the juke have been bitten and turned. Smoke moves Sammy back inside as Remick sings a haunting song to the delight of the partygoers. Back in the juke, the group takes turns eating a clove of garlic to prove whether or not they're a vampire. Pearline says she doesn't like the taste of garlic, but Annie says it's just a test. Pearline pushes back, but Smoke pulls his pistol and says he will shoot her. Sammy intervenes, but Smoke pistol whips him in the mouth with the butt of his gun. Pearline eats the garlic and has a minor reaction before settling down. Delta Slim then downs a garlic clove and has a significant reaction, causing the group to think he may be infected. Except he comes to after a few seconds and says he simply had too much to drink. Annie then asks if Smoke was sure it was blood around the guy they put outside. Smoke checks the liquid on the ground and discovers it's beer. Suddenly, the man they put outside starts banging on the door, telling Smoke to let him in. Cornbread notices him and attacks just as Smoke opens the door. Cornbread bites the man on the side of the face, and Bo walks up and tells Grace he got the car started. Grace notices Bo's not reacting to Cornbread, and he says Cornbread is just hungry. Grace knows Bo has been turned, and he walks over to the doorframe and tells Grace to let him inside so they can get their things and head out. Except she sees his eyes and knows he's a vampire. Smoke tries to reassure Grace, but Remick walks up and says that he is the way out of the situation and promises family and love. Bo agrees and asks again to be invited in. Remick tells Grace he should listen to Bo because he knows everything Bo knows, and says that if they don't let them in, they'll head to the grocery store to attack Lisa. Then, he speaks to her in Taishanese and says he knows how she likes to be licked and won't bite too hard. Sammy calls him the devil, and Remick says he's the one he came for. Sammy's gifts would allow him to see his ancestors, and because he's trapped in this world, he can't see them without help. Sammy steps towards Remick, but Smoke holds him back. Delta Slim tells Remick he can't have him, and Smoke says he won't let Sammy go. Remick tells Smoke he can't save Sammy any more than he could save Stack. Then Stack and Mary walk up behind Remick, who tells Smoke that everything they built was a lie because Hogwood is planning to come back in the morning to kill them all, and that Hogwood is the Grand Master of the KKK. Bert is his nephew, and Stack confirms it by saying the sawmill isn't a juke joint, it's a slaughterhouse. Joan says they're going to start a new clan based on love, and Remick says they'll kill Hogwood soon. Mary steps up and says they're not leaving without everyone, and that after they kill them, they'll have heaven on earth. Suddenly, the man Cornbread killed revives as a vampire. Stack walks up to the doorway, and Delta Slim addresses him, but Stack tells him to shut the fuck up. Stack tells Smoke they were never gonna be free, and that becoming a vampire is the way to freedom, together forever. Stack tells him he won't do it without him. Smoke takes a half step towards Stack, but the group intervenes and closes the door in Stack's face. We then see Smoke shaking and Grace pacing nervously because their daughter is in danger. Grace says Remick got in Beau's mind and tells Smoke they need to stop them. Smoke asks for a second to think, but Grace challenges him, saying he's a soldier who shot 2 men for touching his truck. Now the vampires have killed Stack and turned him into one of them, along with Beau, and that they were gonna kill Lisa. She says it's go time. Delta Slim cuts in and Grace tells him to shut up, but Slim tells her to watch her mouth. Grace starts making a Molotov cocktail as the group of vampires approach the sawmill singing "Pick Poor Robin Clean." Grace looks out the window and Beau blows her a kiss. She grabs the Molotov and tries to rush the door, but she's restrained by Smoke and Annie. She has a vision of Lisa in the doorway to the store, and she starts to yell something, but Smoke puts his hand on her mouth. She bites him, and once free, yells, "Come on in, you motherfuckers." Remick, standing outside, smiles as he's now been invited in. The group grabs their weapons. It's now a face-off between the 2 factions. As the door opens, Grace throws the Molotov, but Remick smacks it away where it ignites on the front door. The groups rush each other, with Grace going straight for Beau. As she rushes him, the fire ignites her dress, and she stakes Beau through the heart while the 2 burn to death. Everyone is in a fight for their life, with Smoke, Annie, Slim, Pearline, and Sammy fighting the vampires. Annie slings garlic water on Remick, and she notices the vampires are affected when he gets hurt. But then, Stack rushes Annie and bites her neck. Stack tells Smoke, everything gonna be alright now. Smoke rushes to Annie, but she's been mortally wounded, and with her dying breath, she makes Smoke keep his promise, and Stack and Mary realize he's going to kill her. Smoke tells Annie he loves her, and then stakes her through the heart, killing her. The vampires rush out of the sawmill as the rest of the group tries to slip out the back. Delta Slim then takes a final swig of beer before slicing his arm open, drawing the other vampires towards him. The group runs upstairs, but Remick grabs Sammy and Stack grabs Smoke. Downstairs, Delta Slim is being torn apart by a group of vampires. Upstairs, Pearline stabs Remick in the back, and he rushes her and bites her neck. She tells Sammy to go as Smoke and Stack fight. Sammy jumps from a short ledge and hurts his ankle when he lands. Remick leaps after him, and when Sammy puts up a fight, he scratches him across the face. Meanwhile, in the sawmill, Stack tells Smoke that he ruined the master plan by killing Annie. The 2 continue fighting while Remick tells Sammy that he wants his stories in songs. Sammy begins reciting the Lord's Prayer, and Remick joins him. The group of vampires then join in on the recitation as Smoke and Stack continue fighting. Remick says the words were forced on him long ago, but that they still bring him comfort. Smoke and Stack continue fighting as Remick tosses Sammy around. Finally, Stack overpowers Smoke and goes to bite his neck, but he's repelled by the mojo bag Annie gave him for protection. With Stack momentarily weakened, Smoke gets the upper hand, and as he goes to stake him, Stack tells him not to be sorry because he always kept him safe. Remick continues his monologue with Sammy, who reaches for his guitar and smashes Remick in the face. The group of vampires feel Remick's pain as a portion of the guitar is lodged in his head. Sammy backs up and Remick rushes him and tells Sammy that he will taste the sweet pain of death and they will make beautiful music together. Behind Sammy, the sun is starting to rise. Just as Remick goes to bite Sammy, Smoke impales him through the heart, and Remick starts to die slowly as the sun rises higher. Smoke and Sammy stand together as the vampires are set on fire by the rising sun. They all die where they stand, and Remick evaporates slowly before letting out a final scream. Sammy and Smoke walk back to the truck, and Smoke gives him the keys to the car, telling him to bury that fucking guitar. Sammy says he can't because it was Charlie Patton's, but Smoke tells him Stack lied and that it was their daddy's guitar. Smoke tells Sammy to be strong before embracing him. He tells him he has some business to handle. We then see Sammy pulling up to the church. We're back at the opening scene. Meanwhile, Smoke tries rolling a cigarette, but his nerves are shot and he can't do it. He has flashbacks of him and everyone at the sawmill the day before. He throws the cigarette down in frustration as we watch the group prep for the grand opening of the juke joint. Smoke then rips the mojo bag from around his neck and pulls out a BAR. He plans to take care of the clan, who is now pulling up to the sawmill. Sammy walks into the church, where his father tells him to drop the guitar. As the clan members try to enter the sawmill, Smoke opens fire, killing them one by one. First from the trees, then by walking them down. But as a group of clansmen try to escape, one of them shoots Smoke in the side. It's a clean through and through, but he's mortally wounded. Hogwood is the last one alive, and he's been shot through the liver. Smoke walks him down, and we see Sammy standing with his father in the church. He has flashbacks to Pearline, Delta Slim, and him playing. Smoke asks Hogwood for a cigarette, but is told to go to hell. Finally, Hogwood reaches into his pocket and hands him a cigarette. Smoke lights it before falling to the ground. As the two men sit there, we hear a baby cooing, and when Smoke looks, he sees Annie nursing their baby. She tells him he can hold her if he puts the cigarette out. She doesn't want any of the smoke to get on her. He tosses the cigarette aside and reaches for the baby, but Hogwood interrupts, saying he has money. Smoke shoots him dead, and Annie passes the baby to Smoke, who says, "Papa's here." The scene cuts back to Sammy, who is still gripping the guitar, except now he's driving the car away from the church, guitar in his hand. The scene then moves 60 years into the future. Chicago, Illinois, October 16th, 1992, to a now old Sammy playing with his band, as the end credits roll. A mid-credit scene shows Sammy sitting at the bar of the club after the show has ended. The bouncer tells him there are two people outside who want to talk to him. Sammy invites them in, and we see Stack and Mary walk in. A flashback shows Mary escaped before the sun came up, and Sammy asks Stack how. Stack says Smoke couldn't kill him, but made him promise not to touch Sammy. Stack sniffs Sammy and says it won't be long, and offers for him to stick around. Sammy says he's seen enough of this world. Stack says they have every one of Sammy's records and asks him to play real music. Sammy pulls out a restored guitar and plays the song he played while riding with Smoke back in 1932, as Stack and Mary sit beside him. Sammy finishes the song, and Stack puts $200 on the table before giving him a hug. Mary says, "Take care, little Sammy." Sammy stops them and says he wakes up once a week paralyzed, reliving that night, but that before the sun went down, he thinks it was the best day of his life. He asks if it was like that for him. Stack says, no doubt about it. It was the last time he saw his brother, the last time he saw the sun, and for a few hours, the last time they were free. Then Smoke and Mary walk out, leaving Sammy at the bar. We see a quick flashback of Sammy riding in the car with Smoke and Stack. Then the word "Sinners" comes up on the screen as the final credits roll. And Sinners has come to an end. Okay, take a moment and take a few deep, cleansing breaths. Before I say anything else, I want to say a couple of things. So I'm going to share my understanding and appreciation of the movie because I truly think Sinners is a modern masterpiece. But it's obvious this is more than just a horror movie. It has a deep connection to both African and African American culture, and I want to center those voices above my own. So here are a handful of terrific podcasts discussing, analyzing, and offering a Black perspective on the movie. Because there's so much to unpack, and there are some terrific voices that have already done some amazing work. Okay, first, the Big Picture Podcast. They released an episode on April 17, 2025, that features an interview with director Ryan Coogler. Second, Girl That's Scary. They released an episode on August 7, 2025. Third, The Homies of Horror. They released an episode on Sinners on May 5, 2025. And finally, Black Men Can't Jump in Hollywood. They released an episode on April 24, 2025. My strong encouragement is to listen to these podcast episodes because they offer a terrific and fascinating perspective on the movie. Okay, from my limited perspective, I felt as though the movie was full of symbolism. First, the movie opens and closes at the church, and it seems as though the church has a dual symbolism, as a place of safety on one hand, and a place of constriction on the other. Sammy is forced to choose between the two. And not only that, religion plays a significant role, as Annie is a hoodoo practitioner whose spells protect Smoke for much of the movie, which presents it in conflict with Christianity. That conflict is complex, though, because Christianity is presented as both a place of hope and community, and as a religion that was forced upon the Black community. Likewise, hoodoo is presented as a spiritual practice rooted in ancestral traditions. Something interesting. It seems the movie presents both Christianity and hoodoo as being equally effective to provide safety and protection. Second, Sammy's guitar. He treasures that guitar and clutches it for dear life, as if it's sacred to him. I understand the guitar as a representation of the history of Black music, and possibly as a bridge from the past to the present to the future. And in a simpler sense, the guitar represents freedom to Sammy, who is desperate to make his own way in the world. Third, the sawmill/juke joint represents a place of joy for the Black community, a space where they are free, if even for a short time. But there's something else, something interesting. The twins notice the dried blood on the floor, which to me represents the trauma and injustice experienced by the Black community. Yet, despite their suffering, they still find moments of joy and freedom. Fourth, the vampires. To me, Remick, Bert, and Joan represent white people who appropriate Black culture for their own benefit. Now before you flip your shit, remember what Remick tells Sammy. I want your stories and I want your songs. And remember what Delta Slim tells Sammy. They want our rhythm, but they don't want our blues. And remember what happens when they turn the partygoers into vampires. They're all dancing outside the juke joint, not to blues music, but to Irish folk songs. There's something else. Remick's offer is based on what he calls equality, acceptance, love, community, and family. Except it's equality without diversity, because in Remick's system, the promise of eternal life essentially becomes assimilation, where Black identity is completely erased and rendered irrelevant. And what about the scene where Sammy plays and conjures music legends from the past and future? It's obvious Sammy's gift allows him to pierce the veil and celebrate a diverse array of music across cultures, including African tribal music, hip-hop and rap, rhythm and blues, rock and roll, and gospel. And an interesting addition, the musical ancestors of both Bo and Grace Chow. Listen, this scene is one of the most beautiful I've ever seen in a movie, and is done in what appears to be a flowing, continuous shot. We watch as the camera pans across the partygoers at the juke joint. It hovers, lingers, scans, and focuses. And one article described it perfectly, stating, quote, "It's a jaw-dropping metaphor for the interconnected tendrils that minority cultures weave to create greater bonds and how they intertwine and get historically passed down, remaining strong against the efforts of dominant cultures to scrub them away." End quote. Of course, Sammy's gift is both a blessing and a curse, because he also summons Remick and his bloodthirsty group of vampires. And to me, that's the real heart of Sinners, because it reminds us that life is complicated, and that we're all saint and sinner alike. Sammy, recognizing this dilemma, ultimately chooses to use his gift for good, and the juxtaposition between Sammy and Remick reminds us that our gifts and talents can either be wielded for the betterment and flourishing of others, or for their destruction. I love movies, and especially horror movies that make you think, that challenge conventional and comfortable ideas and present new ones for consideration. True meaningful progress doesn't lean into the same way of thinking about or doing things. Instead, progress requires us to look honestly at what's in front of us and determine whether it's in our best interest and the best interest of others, or not. Ryan Coogler didn't just give us an original story. He also found new ways to use well-worn vampire tropes. Here are a few examples. First, the invitation. It's well known that vampires require an invitation to be let inside someone's home or space. Most often, that happens to an unsuspecting person who becomes an unwilling and ignorant victim. In Sinners, though, the only one who doesn't know is Cornbread, and from that point on, the request for an invite into the juke only serves to raise the eyebrows of the group. Second, the garlic, holy water, wooden stakes, mojo bag, and sunrise. Each of these are used differently in Act 3. Garlic, when tossed with the liquid, becomes a form of chemical warfare, but when eaten by the group, it serves as a litmus test to prove they're alive. And, in sort of a fun nod, it reminds me of the scene in The Thing where they're testing the blood supply. It's a scene that provides one of the best jump scares in a horror movie. The holy water is interesting, because generally that would be blessed by a Roman Catholic priest. Except there are no priests in Sinners. But Annie is a hoodoo practitioner, and it's safe to assume that she blessed the water. The wooden stakes are used in the typical way, driven straight through the heart. The mojo bag replaced the crucifix, because when we see Stack and Smoke tussling at the end, Stack is weakened by Smoke's mojo bag. And remember, Annie told him it helped keep him safe to that point. But when Smoke takes it off, just before confronting the clan, the music stops abruptly, and soon after he is mortally wounded. And finally, the sunrise is also interesting, because initially I wondered why the vampire clan wouldn't run for cover, except the entire scene plays out perfectly. Sammy wounds Remick with the guitar, causing him to stumble and become disoriented, and the vampires to feel his pain. Those handful of seconds allowed Smoke to sneak in behind Remick and stake him through the heart, just as the sun peeked over the horizon, setting Remick and the vampire clan on fire. Okay, I can go on and on about this movie. We're almost an hour in, or we're actually a little over an hour in. But I want to know what you thought about Sinners. As always, I posted on Instagram and asked what you love and hate about this movie. And as always, you came through in thoughtful fashion. From Real Talk, I don't even know where to begin. Simply stated, Sinners is a masterpiece, with a powerful story, flawless music, and phenomenal performances, especially Delroy Lindo cementing his legendary status. It stands as one of the most important films of the last 25 years. From The Real Voice, one word, masterpiece. From Washburn writes, I have no notes, honestly. I was enthralled the entire time. I was satisfied by the history of music and the cultural story that was honest and also served the story. A clinic in how to set up pins and knock them down. I couldn't get enough of interviews and talk about it after I watched it. And I played the soundtrack a lot. From W.H. Vigo, mesmerizing film incorporating African and African American life with a high degree of historical realism of the South in the 1930s. Particularly the scene of spirits past, present, and future. There were so many references to African tradition and Afrofuturism. The complexity of the oppressed, Remick, becoming the oppressor was interesting. The film can be summarized in 2 sentences. We want your music, and we want your stories. Followed by, don't let them in. And they want our rhythm, but not our blues. Hit me right in the heart as a black person. I think this film will be academically studied in the future. And from projectile__Varmin. This movie was an unexpected breath of fresh air for horror. I loved the storytelling, the characters, and especially Michael B. Jordan's performances. Ryan Coogler knocked it out of the park and deserves all the accolades. The Black Experience, directed by a black director, helps this movie stand on strong legs and will hopefully kick some ass winning awards this year. A huge shout out to each person who submitted a comment. As always, thank you so much for contributing. Guys, that's it for this episode of One Good Scare. As always, thanks for spending your time with me. I don't take it for granted. And of course, be sure to join me next episode as we dive into a dark and disturbing supernatural horror film, The Dark and the Wicked. Till next time, I'm your host, Will. Thanks for hanging out.